the Assistant Chief Education Program, the module on team planning. Team planning is another essential skill that chiefs and assistant chiefs need to have. Your election official roster that you get from the elections manager before the election is just a collection of individuals until you bring them together to work as a team. A team is a group with a common goal, following a leader who has a plan. Team planning includes education, communication, and role assignments. Team education. You may have experience with your team from prior elections. You may know who needs more education and who needs less. When the hardware, software, law, and/or procedures change, everyone will need more education. That's the law. You need to ensure that your team gets the education that they need. I'll say that again. You need to ensure that your team gets the education that they need. Who needs what education? New officers of election, often called newbies, require special education offered before each election. If they cannot attend that offering, they must take the online courses offered by the Virginia Department of Elections, also called ELECT. Taking both is best. Officers of election, or EOs, include newbies, EOs, as well as chiefs and assistants. So when I say EOs require education on all new systems and procedures in the polling place, that means all EOs, including newbies, chiefs, and assistants. Specialists are EOs who have been selected by the chief to receive advanced education. The types of advanced education might include provisional and same-day registration processing, scanner setup, closeout and unjamming, poll pad setup, etc. Chiefs and assistants require education before every election on the particulars for that election. Additionally, the chiefs and assistants should be subject matter experts on all the devices and procedures in the polling place. So make sure among yourselves that you have gotten every updated education course that came along. Education communications are an important part of communications planning. The elections manager will send a general schedule of courses to all EOs before each election. The chief has the job to make sure that every EO on their roster understands what courses they are supposed to attend, and then remind them of it, maybe again. You should keep track for each EO when they are planning to attend the sessions they need to attend, and make sure you have their acknowledgement. Chiefs and assistants should be coordinating their attendance at in-person classes so they can meet up with their team EOs when possible. There may be some specialist assignments that the EOs need to make in terms of telling people which classes to go to. Make sure that's part of your education communications. There are 3 job assignments you should make for each team member before the election, and there may be more that you choose to make. These 3 key assignments are setup, starting, and closeout. Setup assignments are the jobs an EO will perform before the polls open to get some aspect of the polling place ready. Setup assignments are often made in groups of 2 or more EOs, e.g. setting up the scanner, the poll books, etc. Some assignments are best managed by a team with a D and an R. Setup assignments need to factor in knowledge as well as abilities. There's no point sending someone to unpack the cage if they aren't physically capable of lifting everything out of the cage. Ensure that EOs with the same setup assignments know who their partners are. So first thing in the morning, on the election day, Sally and Joey can meet up and get going on their chore. Post the setup and starting assignments on the cage in case folks forget what they are supposed to do. And consider assigning an assistant chief to be part of the scanner team, or if not there, the poll book team. Both of these devices are critical to the success of your election, and it warrants having some of your most experienced and capable leaders on that project. Setup and closing assignments do not match up perfectly with EO officer positions. For setup, you need teams or individuals responsible for at least the following: poll pads, cage photography and unloading. In other words, take a picture of the cage before you unload it, so at the end of the day you can reverse the process. Scanner and express vote setup, all the greeter setup, ballots, marking booths, signs, and provisional and SDR setup. Your precinct may have special needs for other teams. The starting assignment is the position that an EO starts in for the day, and there is more on the nuances of this assignment later in this presentation. A starting assignment should, in general, be just that, where an EO starts. In most cases, it should not be what they do all day. There are some special circumstances where one EO stays in the same job all day, whether due to their preferences, their abilities, their education, or other factors as determined by the chief. But this should not be the rule. Most positions should be rotated through, even in roles that have a permanent assignment. So for example, if you have someone who always wants to work the scanner or always is on the ballot table, work other EOs into that role, even if only as helpers, to ensure that the experience of performing that role is not only in one EO's hands. It's great to have an experienced person on the ballot table. It's in fact essential to having a really good election, to have someone who knows what they're doing there. But if you only have one person in your polling place who knows how to work the ballot table, then the day they are not available is going to be a very sad day. In general, EOs like to do different jobs, to learn more, to alleviate boredom, to get to sit or stand, and in general, just to have some change in an otherwise long day. As has been said before, there is a good argument to be made that the team that sets something up should be the team that closes something down. They are most likely to know where everything goes, they know what they did in the morning, and because of these two, they are probably the fastest and most efficient. You can assign changes to the closeout teams from the setup teams, but you should have a good reason for doing so. Looking at closeout assignments, just like setups, closing assignments do not match up perfectly with EO officer positions. For closing, you need teams or individuals that close down, put away, or take care of the poll pads, the scanner and express vote, cage loading this time, which generally can't happen until the scanner is done, putting away all the greeter materials, storing the ballots in the appropriate boxes, putting down the marking booths, taking down the signs, collecting them from outside as well, putting away all the provisional and SDR materials, and completing the statement of results. These teams do not all take the same amount of time to do their jobs, and the statement of results team cannot start until the scanner is shut down. You might assign someone to do EPB closing first or greeter space cleanup, and then report for statement of results duty, for example. Cage loading cannot start until the scanner is shut down, as it goes in first. And just to highlight a note about the statement of results, this is something that should be done by two EOs representing two different parties, and they should compare their results and make sure they're the same. That process can be overseen by a chief or an assistant chief, but it shouldn't be something that the chief goes off into a corner and does by themselves. So how do you choose EOs for the polling place jobs? The polling place has a number of distinct roles for EOs, and each requires different education, and there are different considerations for each role. We'll talk about each of these in turn: the greeter officer, the check-in officer, the ballot officer, the marking booth officer, the scanning machine officer, and the provisional or SDR officer. We used to consider the greeter officer a great job for newbies, because back in the day, all you had to do was tell folks to get out their ID and direct them to the poll pads. That's not the case anymore. Greeter has a lot of responsibilities. One is managing the flow of voters into the precinct. They are looking not only at the queue for the poll pads, but also the queues elsewhere in the polling place and acting as the traffic cop who stops traffic in until the jam clears. Lines of more than a few voters anywhere in the polling place are signs of trouble, and the greeter helps to prevent them to enable the EOs to maintain control in the polling place. The greeter is also assessing incoming voters, trying to identify voters who might need assistance, so that this need can be identified before the voter gets to the marking booth. The greeter is keeping one eye out the door, looking for outside poll voters. The greeter is also minding the ballot drop box for absentee ballot drop-offs. The greeter is directing voters to the sample ballots so voters can be prepared for what they are going to get. This is particularly handy in primaries where there might be a lot of candidates for a position, or in elections where there is a referendum or are referenda that the voters have to vote on, where there are a lot of words the voters might need to read. For busy elections, you may have two greeters do all of the above, or in certain polling places, because of the size of the greeting area, you might have even more. And of course, the greeter tells voters to get their IDs out and directs them to the poll pads. The check-in officer works at the poll pad. In addition to knowing how to check in a voter on the poll pad, the check-in officer needs to know how to talk to the voters. Voters marked as inactive should not generally be told they are inactive. Voters with issues that may require them to vote provisionally should be passed on to the chief or assistant or provisional specialist without being left with the feeling that they may not get to vote. Voters who are sensitive about answering the which ballot question for a dual primary need diplomatic, nonpartisan, soothing responses. And for general elections, the check-in officer should be on average quick at their job because you don't want lines of people queuing up waiting to check in. It is a good practice to have your best poll pad officers as the starting team. Sometimes there's a queue when you open the door, and your best team may work out any problems faster than anyone else. The ballot officer needs to be very meticulous. The ballot officer has some manual record-keeping responsibilities that other positions do not have. The ballot record report, ballot tally sheet, keeping track of spoiled ballots. The ballot officer also has the responsibility for controlling the ballots. Finding good ballot officers is difficult because you have to match the temperament needed to do the job with the sunny disposition we would like all officers to have. This is often a role which could be done by one officer, but might better be done by two. The marking booth officer job is a deceptive job because it looks very simple. But it is not. There are a number of components to the marking booth officer's job. First off, this is a sit and stand job. While the marking booth officer needs to be standing much of the time, they should have available a chair so they can take a rest because they don't need to be standing all of the time. But the marking booth officer has several key responsibilities. First among those is to identify voters who made it this far but should have had assistance offered for them. You can see that sometimes when two voters come together and go into the same marking booth and voter A is trying to help voter B. Clearly, this can't happen without a voter assistance form having been signed. So the marking booth officer can identify that, get that form in place, get that voter the assistance they need. You can also identify and correct voters who are misusing their phones. Keep the idle chatter in the marking booths down. Friends who come in who are chit-chatting back and forth. That's not creating a very conducive environment for other voters to vote, no matter how much fun the two chit-chatters are having. Another big responsibility in the marking booth is to ensure that materials that are left behind are properly addressed. Sample ballots from campaigners outside or that the voters brought in with them from whatever source need to go in the trash. But keys, glasses, wallets, IDs, small children, all go back to the voter if you can catch them, or to the chief for the lost and found envelope. On wet days, make sure that the marking booths stay dry. In general, making sure that the surfaces are clean. A wet ballot that only got wet because someone put it down in some drops may not scan properly. While patrolling the marking booth area, the marking booth officer must give voters enough space to not feel as though their secret ballot is being infringed upon. The scanner or machine officer is someone who needs to be prepared to say something like this hundreds of times each day in a cheerful and reasonably loud voice. Please place your ballot on the arrow and slide it into the scanner, followed a few seconds later by wait to make sure the screen shows that your ballot has counted, and then your ballot is counted, thanks for voting. The scanner officer needs to do all of this while staying 4 feet or more away from the scanner. And if a jam or a misfeed occurs, the scanner rejects a voter's ballot, the scanner officer needs to know when they need to instruct the voter as to what to do and when they themselves need to step in to take direct action in view of the voter. And there's a distinction there that they should have learned as they were learning this job. The provisional and SDR officer job used to be the exclusive domain of chiefs and assistants. Of course, that was back in the days when a typical precinct might see 3 or 4 or 0 provisional voters in one day. There's been a dramatic rise in provisional votes. In November of 2024, we had 2,088 provisional votes spread across our precincts. This has led us to conclude that it's often valuable to have a separate officer of election who does this as their job. The reason for this growth has been same-day registration and absentee ballots, which were not returned. There's been a tremendous rise in the number of voters who get absentee ballots, and if they don't bring those absentee ballots with them to the polling place, all they can do is vote provisionally. There is some specialized education needed to do this job, and there is a course for provisional and SDR officers. It's vital that the officer complete all of the provisional SDR documentation correctly, and to ensure that the voter completes their information as well. Otherwise, the provisional vote may not count and/or the registration may not be valid. And by completing this information, that means the provisional officer can read what the voter wrote. Because if the voter has scrawled something that can't be read, then that may impede their ability to have their vote counted. This officer is likely someone who may need to talk to the registrar's office on their own during the day, if so directed by the chief. Rotating officers within the polling place. An assistant chief may be assigned the task of keeping track of who to rotate, who not to rotate, what jobs each EO is suited to, which jobs they will need more help, on-the-job education assistance with. They may also be responsible for moving officers during the day to different jobs. You may want to do this in staggered shifts, so maybe all the check-in officers don't leave that job at the same time, with a fresh crew coming in to replace them. And also keeping track of who has worked where and where they might go next. This assistant chief responsible for rotating officers will probably have good feedback to offer on the EO evaluations that the chief has to do at the end of the election. The chief needs to maintain oversight of the election, to walk around or look around to see how your EOs are doing and to help them if they need it, especially if they do not know they need it. However, if you offer too much overseeing, it can begin to feel like overseering, particularly with officers of election who know what they're doing and don't need any assistance. This overseering would be described as what happens to vegetables under a broiler. Don't micromanage your EOs when they're obviously competent in their jobs. However, when you have new EOs or EOs who are not doing what they should be doing, even with additional guidance, you need to firmly direct or redirect them and possibly reassign them to a job they can do. That's an essential part of being a chief. As our afterword, telling your team their assignments in advance contributes to their confidence and success. They will know what they are doing from the time they arrive until the end of the day. Ensuring your team is educated properly for their jobs is your job, as is getting the right people in the right jobs. Having EOs in jobs that they have the right job skills for will improve their chances for success and your chances of having a very successful election.